get started. Committee will come to order, and the chair will recognize himself for an opening statement. Today, the committee is going to consider two important bipartisan bills in our ongoing effort to modernize government for the innovation era. Our first bill is H.R. 2810, the Medicare Patient Access and Quality Improvement Act. This legislation reforms the current physician fee schedule by repealing the highly flawed Sustainable Growth Rate, SGR, and replacing it with a system that promotes the highest quality of care for seniors and still provides fair payment to their physicians. This proceeding is the culmination of an over 2-year effort to fix SGR that is the product of a thoughtful, bipartisan, transparent, and fair process. The legislation is long overdue, that's for sure. And since its passage in 1997, SGR has bred uncertainty and frustration. Doctors have been forced to endure 11th-hour fixes, sometimes on a monthly basis, which clearly have stymied physicians' abilities to run their own practices. H.R. 2810 remedies this ailing physician payment system while encouraging the highest quality of care for America's seniors. It gives seniors the peace of mind of knowing that their trusted physician will be there when they need them by securing stable payments for doctors, and gives physicians the certainty that they need to care for their patients by removing the specter of a practice-killing 25% across-the-board pay cut. It also brings Medicare into alignment with the best practices of the medical community and emphasizes quality over quantity and works hand in glove with the medical profession to define the benchmarks of quality medicine. This will lead to better outcomes and lower costs for seniors and put the Medicare system on a more sustainable path. For years, repealing and replacing SGR has been a top priority for lawmakers and for stakeholders. Yet no meaningful process or progress has ever been made until now. We've been deliberate in ensuring that the medical community finally has a voice in the process. I recently met with a group of Michigan doctors who were especially constructive with their input to the opt-out provision. In harnessing the ideas of the medical profession and working as a team with Energy and Commerce Democrats as well as Ways and Means Republicans and Democrats, we've crafted a policy that will not only get out of committee, but clearly has the merits to make it to the President's desk. Ways and Means Committee Chair Dave Camp has been a very valued partner in that effort, and I commend Chairman Pitts and Dr. Burgess for their leadership in advancing this process further than any prior Congress. I also want to especially commend my colleagues Mr. Waxman, Mr. Pallone, and Mr. Dingell for their leadership. The full committee vote will be an important milestone tomorrow, but we're also resolved to achieve reform in a fiscally responsible manner, and despite our significant progress, will not be satisfied until the ink is dry on the President's signature. The second bill that the committee will consider is the FCC Consolidated Reporting Act, sponsored by Mr. Scalise, Chairman Walden, and Ranking Member Eshoo, which consolidates 8 separate congressionally mandated reports on the communications industry into a single comprehensive report with a focus on competition among technology platforms, developing and deploying communications to unserved communities, eliminating regulatory barriers, and empowering small businesses. Eliminating outdated reports and streamlining existing ones will allow the Commission to be more efficient and effective, reducing their administrative burden and keeping pace with the rapid changes in this critical segment of the market. This, too, bipartisan effort is a step in the right direction towards smarter government in the innovation era. At this point, I yield for an opening statement to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman from California, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to be part of this bipartisan effort to replace the Medicare Sustainable Growth Rate, or SGR, formula that has frustrated providers and beneficiaries alike for years. While we put in place this SGR with good intentions in the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, it has never provided the fiscal or programmatic stability that we need. What is obvious today is that we have a bipartisan commitment to solve this problem, and when we decide to work together, we can achieve positive results. I want to thank Chairman Upton, Subcommittee Chairman Pitts, Subcommittee Ranking Member Pallone, as well as Congressman Burgess and Dingell, the sponsors of the bill, and their staffs for the bipartisan spirit in which we have been working on this. The legislation coming out of our committee is a much better product because of our collaborative efforts. H.R. 2810 creates stability for the provider payment system at the same time as supporting greater accountability through quality measurement. Notably, this measurement not only looks at clinical care and outcomes, but also patient experience and whether beneficiary needs are being met. The legislation also creates additional opportunities for providers to develop and participate in new delivery models, engage in integrated approaches to coordinated care, and have improved access to Medicare data to support those efforts. And this legislation supports primary care and care coordination through new payments for care coordination in patient-centered medical homes and patient-centered specialty practices. H.R. 2810 is not intended to be a comprehensive bill to address every Medicare issue. It is narrowly tailored to address the large and pressing issue of physician reimbursement. There are many other Medicare issues that are important to committee members that this bill does not address, such as the so-called extenders provisions that are needed to continue important Medicare and Medicaid policies. The fact that we are not dealing with them today does not reduce the importance or our commitment to address them. And more than a decade of Congress saying something needs to be done, I'm pleased that this committee is the first to act and bring this issue to the forefront. The status quo, both with regard to physician payment system and the value we need from our healthcare system, is unacceptable. We have bipartisan agreement on that, and I hope that our ability to move legislation out of this committee will provide a powerful mode of collaboration as this legislation moves forward. If this legislation is to become law, it is imperative we continue to work together, along with our colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee, to develop pay-fors that maintain our bipartisan consensus. The second bill we're going to consider is H.R. 2844, the Federal Communications Commission Consolidated Reporting Act of 2013, which is another bipartisan measure sponsored by Mr. Scalise, Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo. I'm pleased that we're working together to rationalize and make more efficient FCC reporting obligations. Streamlining outdated agency requirements allows the agency to devote limited resources more efficiently, which is better for the FCC and the American taxpayers. As this bill moves towards the floor and onto the Senate, I look forward to continuing our bipartisan collaboration to consider whether additional enhancements make sense. In particular, I want to make it clear that our elimination of the cable pricing report does not undermine other agency obligations or limit valuable information utilized by consumers and policymakers. I urge my colleagues to support both of these bipartisan measures, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Chair yields back, or the ranking member yields back. I would recognize now Mr. Hall for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm going to direct my comments today toward the Sustainable Growth Rate Bill. Repealing the SGR and providing our doctors with a stable payment model is something we've been talking about and been intending to do for years now. And it seems that everything's aligned now, and I'm happy to see that we're moving forward in a bipartisan way. The fact that the bill passed by voice vote in subcommittee last week is a testament to that, and we hope we can keep this momentum up and permanently repeal the SGR once and for all. I'll not be offering any amendments at this time, but I do have a couple of suggestions for when we begin to figure out how to pay for the bill. One suggestion I have is to allow political subdivision health care pools to compete on a fair basis under our new health care laws. Almost every state has health care pools like the two in Texas. We have one for municipal employees and one for counties. Other states have health care pools for school districts as well. In Texas, the pools provide quality health care that's generally less expensive than what will be available in the statewide exchange. Most of the municipalities in the pool have fewer than 50 employees. Under my bill, H.R. 1076, the employees in the pools would be eligible for premium tax credits and could stay in the pool. If it wouldn't save the federal government money, they would not be eligible for tax credits and would probably end up in the statewide exchange. Mr. Chairman, if this is scored by CBO and reducing the deficit, it is my hope that you'll work with us and work with our colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee to get the language included in the final version of the SGR bill. My proposal makes good common sense, and it'll help with our federal budget situation. My second suggestion is to allow for reimbursement of virtual colonoscopies under the Medicare program. I have a bill, H.R. 991, which would provide a cheaper and less invasive opportunity for people to get screened for colon cancer. By catching the polyps early enough, we can save their lives and save the government money. According to Medical Imaging and Technology Alliance, quote, an estimated 50% of patients eligible for colon cancer screening do not undergo the recommended colonoscopy. These screening rates are unacceptable and are a major contributor as to why colorectal cancer is the second leading cause of death and cancer death in the United States. Offering virtual colonoscopy is an alternative to the traditionally invasive colonoscopy, and it would increase screening rates and save lives. I have a scoring request, and I ask that request it's in with the Congressional Budget Office, and if their numbers show that it would save the government money, I would urge you to consider this provision during the discussions on how to pay for the SGR, and I thank you for your time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I want to assure the gentleman I look forward to continuing to work with him on these important issues. Thank you. Thanks for your leadership. Recognize now a gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, for 3 minutes for an opening statement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Waxman. I'm proud to support both H.R. 2844, the Federal Communications Commission Consolidated Reporting Act, and H.R. 2810, the Medicare Patient Access and Quality Improvement Act. These bills, as was said before, represent the good work that can be done when the committee comes together in a bipartisan manner, a positive trend I hope we will see more of in the future. With regard to the Medicare physician reimbursement bill before us, for more than a decade I've heard legitimate complaints from physicians upset about why they continue to face looming cuts each year, even though they are providing quality care to their patients. While Congress has had discussions about repealing the SGR, and we have voted every year since 2002 to prevent the scheduled cuts from being implemented, very few legislators have taken the next step of finding a workable solution for how to fairly reimburse our Medicare physicians. Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Waxman, Ranking Member Pallone, Chairman Emeritus Dingell, Chairman Pitts, and Vice Chairman Burgess, I want to commend all of you on this hard work, the hard work you've put into H.R. 2810. The bill before this committee today is not perfect, and it will not make everyone happy, but each of you deserves a lot of credit for presenting a very viable solution to the SGR problem. This is a good framework that moves us closer to fairly compensating our Medicare physician workforce while incentivizing good quality care for our Medicare beneficiaries. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of H.R. 2810. I know many obstacles remain before SGR is finally a thing of the past. However, I hope any final Medicare reimbursement package will ensure proper risk adjustment is done to account for the impact of socioeconomic factors in determining physician reimbursement. Furthermore, I'd like to see timely consideration of the various Medicaid and Medicare extenders which have historically moved on the same bill as the annual doc fix. I don't want to see these important provisions abandoned should we find a permanent solution to the SGR. And finally, I know one of the largest hurdles to overcome will be how to pay for the costs associated with fixing the SGR. As I mentioned during the Health Subcommittee markup, I urge leadership on both sides of the aisle to continue the bipartisan efforts shown by our committee and reject poisonous offsets which I and others will find impossible to vote for. I want to see the SGR issue permanently addressed, but I will vote no on final passage if forced to by terrible offsets. Again, I think this is a good product. I thank the chair and yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair would recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And these are indeed two important bills we're going to mark up tomorrow. Let me just focus my comments on H.R. 2810, the Medicare Patient Access and Quality Improvement Act. You know, if the sustainable growth rate goes into effect, it means an across-the-board cut of 25% for providers. And that very uncertainty threatens access to care for seniors, and it also threatens the provider's ability to run their practices. But instead, this legislation preserves an enhanced fee-for-service. Not only is the SGR repealed, but there's a period of payment transition which is stable. An inflation adjuster is built in so that payments stay relative year to year. It reduces the administrative burden by building off systems that providers with which are already familiar. It encourages maximum alignment in provider reporting. And this is really important to me. Medicine is put back into the driver's seat of working with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to develop the quality measures guided by best clinical practice. We do create an additional pathway to test models that enhance care and reduce costs. Certainly more is done to encourage patient-centered medical homes and to ensure that our efforts to have seniors receive the best quality medicine that America can give, and we don't create medical legal liability actions. This is yet another important step forward in an extremely collaborative and transparent process. And Mr. Chairman, the process would not look nearly as promising as it does if it was not for your leadership and that of Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Waxman, Ranking Member Pallone, and Mr. Dingell. I would like to note, Chairman, that you set 3 ambitious priorities for the committee for us to complete by the August recess. And a lot of people in this town said it wasn't possible, it couldn't be done. But with the passage of this bill, the committee will have met your goal. I want to thank you for allowing me to work with you on each of these initiatives. I'd like to thank you for working with me on H.R. 1428, which ensures transplant patients have access to necessary drug to protect their transplanted kidney. I look forward to continuing to work with you to advance this common sense policy as soon as possible. I need to thank the staff who worked night and day, literally, came in every weekend. Majority Staff Clay Alsbach, Robert Horn, Dr. Stephen Ferreira, Katie Navaria, and the former Majority Committee staffer Dr. John O'Shea, as well as the talented team led by Amy Hall with the minority. And certainly from my personal office, J.P. Poliskevitz was instrumental in making sure this thing got across the finish line. Finally, the unsung heroes of a process like this, House Legislative Counsel, deserve a special word of thanks, notably Jessica Shapiro and Ed Grossman and Jesse Cross. The progress we have made towards repealing the SGR and implementing a workable reimbursement structure is unparalleled, but it is up to us now to continue the process. Let's continue to work together and ensure our seniors receive the best quality of care while ensuring that our reimbursement structure provides needed stability for our providers. I urge all members to support the bill tomorrow and yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair would recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the markup on these bipartisan bills. The FCC Consolidated Reporting Act will help streamline the FCC. It is a welcome effort, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on ways to improve the FCC further. The Medicare Patient Access and Quality Improvement Act is the biggest effort from this committee this year. I'm proud of the work this committee has done in crafting a bipartisan SGR replacement. For some time, I've been disappointed in the partisanship that's taken hold in our House and to a lesser extent on the committee. We're setting a good example, and I hope there are more examples yet to come. Repealing and replacing the SGR should be a top priority of this committee and this Congress. The SGR creates uncertainty for providers and beneficiaries and bogs down Congress with the annual doc fix. We need to move past this flawed system. For this reason, I co-sponsored the bill and hope that we'll finally see an end to the SGR system. I know my colleague from Texas, Mr. Hall, my friend, I want to work with you on your pay for, and I think the Affordable Care Act, because I also have talked to some folks in Texas that need some assistance, and I'm looking forward to look at the proposal and see how we can work together to find that common ground. During the subcommittee markup last week, a number of members, including myself, expressed concern about what the bill does not do. Every year, part of the eventual legislative package that contains the SGR also includes what we call the Medicare and Medicaid extenders. I hope the collaboration continues so that these difficult issues are dealt with in a bipartisan manner as well. Regarding one of my top priorities, a bill Mr. Whitfield and I have had, H.R. 800, which would address another payment discrepancy in Medicare related to Part B drugs. I'm disappointed that this language is not included in the SGR legislation, but SGR and prompt pay, while related, are not intertwined. I appreciate the willingness of committee leadership on both sides to hear us out and hope that this bill is expanded. If this bill is expanded in scope, the prompt pay language will be included. If not, I support moving H.R. 800 separately because it's an important issue to cancer patients and deserves to be fixed. Overall, I'm pleased with the direction of the bill taken, and I look forward to working with our committee to finish it and move it on to the House floor, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. Gingrey, 3 minutes for opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. H.R. 2810 is an example of the hard work put forward by this committee to once and for all fix the SGR formula. And it comes at a time when doctors are finding it more and more difficult to continue seeing Medicare patients. In fact, according to CMS, the number of doctors who have opted out of Medicare has nearly tripled in the last 3 years, almost 10,000 doctors in 2012. I cannot help but believe that the exodus of doctors has been caused in part by the uncertainty that this broken formula has created. This bill also gives much-needed clarity to the practice of medicine by confirming that federal quality incentives are no substitute in a medical malpractice case for the standards of care developed by specialty societies and determined and practiced by those physicians. This is an extremely important determination that will protect both patients and doctors. As we favorably report this important piece of legislation out of Energy and Commerce this week, we know that the work is not done. Any fiscally responsible bill in today's budgetary environment must be paid for, and I look forward to helping to find offsets that do not impact the practice of medicine, but instead focus on good governance and combating waste. As we consider the next steps after SGR repeal, I hope that we'll be able to continue to focus on how to further improve medical care in this country. I think that it's important to stress that interoperable health information systems are coordinated and quality care for consumers go hand in hand. Without interoperability, it's unlikely any of the revolutionary alternative payment models that will be created due to H.R. 2810 will lower cost and improve quality. The administration, specifically the Office of the National Coordinator, must ensure that information technology is interoperable so that doctors are successful in the new payment and delivery models included in the bipartisan SGR replacement bill. I hope to work to address this issue in the future. Mr. Chairman, I'm also encouraged that we will be considering H.R. 2844, the FCC Consolidation Reporting Act. This bill will make the FCC more efficient by eliminating a number of duplicative, repealed, or outdated reports that are still listed in statute. For example, in the 21st century, is it necessary for the FCC to provide the report on competition between wire telephone and wire telegraph providers? Think Morse code? I think not. By making the FCC work in a more efficient manner, H.R. 2844 will create more regulatory certainty in the telecommunications industry. This will inevitably reduce the burden for job creators, particularly small businesses that have been impacted by inconsistencies at the FCC. As a former member of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee, I commend Chairman Walden and Mr. Scalise, my colleague from Louisiana, for again moving this bill forward. I urge my colleagues to support both of these bills, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky. 3 minutes for opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you, anybody listening in on this hearing would think this was a really bipartisan Congress. I love that. This is good. And I am very pleased that we could come together in a bipartisan manner to advance these two bills. I support H.R. 2844 as a way of cleaning up federal reporting statutes, and I am pleased that we were able to come to an agreement on a manager's amendment that will address a few remaining concerns with this bill. I'm pleased to support H.R. 2810. This bipartisan legislation would eliminate the broken SGR, Sustainable Growth Rate Formula, and allow seniors and individuals with disabilities to never again fear that their health care providers will opt out of Medicare as drastic SGR cuts loom. This legislation will also build upon existing efforts to tie provider reimbursement to quality outcomes, to promote care coordination in medical homes, and to promote alternative payment models. While I am pleased that we've been able to come together to develop legislation to repeal and replace the SGR formula, it is absolutely vital that we continue to work together to identify bipartisan pay-fors that do not cut benefits or shift costs to Medicare beneficiaries. The average Medicare beneficiary already spends an average of $4,500 a year on health care out of pocket, and we should not be asking them to bear the additional burden of paying for this repeal. Shifting those costs would force many to forego medically necessary care, which will lead to sicker patients and costlier care down the road. As we advance this bipartisan legislation, I hope that we can commit to continuing to work together to permanently fix other critical benefits that we have included in the extenders package that has moved each year with the doc fix. Those benefits should include a permanent extension of the Qualified Individual or QI program and a permanent extension of the exceptions process to the Medicare therapy caps. Extending those and other programs included in the extenders package is important to ensuring that beneficiaries can receive the health services that they need. Let me also just say happy anniversary to Medicare. This is the 48th anniversary of Medicare, and before Medicare was passed, half of all seniors were completely uninsured. So I'm very happy that we're making progress today on being able to assure that seniors and others on Medicare will be able to get what they need. I do want to make clear that I will be forced to oppose this effort if the repeal of the SGR is paid for by cutting benefits or shifting costs to Medicare beneficiaries. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, 3 minutes for opening statement, please.
I'd like to thank Dr. Burgess for having this markup and want to talk specifically about the two bills that we will be taking up. H.R. 2844, the FCC Consolidated Reporting Act, is a bipartisan bill that seeks to provide flexibility and relief to both job creators as well as to the FCC. I especially want to thank the Telecommunications Chair, Mr. Walden, and Ranking Member Eshoo for working with me in a bipartisan way on this bill, which, if you look at it, is another step in the process of streamlining government so that business can focus their resources and their time on growing and creating jobs rather than being burdened by outdated and cumbersome mandates from the federal government. Every dollar spent on outdated FCC reporting mandates is a dollar that could otherwise be used to create jobs and develop new ideas that will grow our economy. H.R. 2844 also gives the FCC greater reporting flexibility by consolidating 8 annual and triennial reports into a single biennial communications marketplace report. Recently, the House Appropriations Committee provided the FCC $325 million for the next fiscal year, which is $15 million less than last year's enacted level. The FCC will have fewer dollars and will be operating under a leaner budget during the upcoming year. So we would be wise in this Congress to give the Commission greater flexibility to operate within this new budget reality. And yes, we, as my good friend Dr. Gingrich said, we finally do strike the Telegraph report from the law books. So if anybody's still a fan of the Telegraph, its time has probably come and passed that it no longer is mentioned in law as a report that we need to have. I have renewed hope that as the House works again in a strong bipartisan fashion to move this bill, that the Senate will take up Senator Heller's companion bill so that together we can get it to the President's desk for signature during this Congress. Regarding H.R. 2018 by Dr. Burgess, this is a crucial step in providing physicians with certainty and stability as it relates to the Medicare payment system. The current SGR system is deeply flawed, requiring Congress to override the formula annually to prevent cuts to physician payments. In addition to providing physicians with more stability, the the legislation will reward them for the quality of care they provide to Medicare beneficiaries. As the recent Medicare Trustees Report demonstrated, this program is faced with the prospect of insolvency within the next 14 years. Given the stark reality, I applaud the bipartisan efforts to draft this legislation and bring more stability to physicians, better care to patients, and a more accurate and fair method of payment for life-saving services. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui. 3 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Medicare Patient Access and Quality Improvement Act of 2013 marks the most substantial progress yet to replace the SGR. This legislation seeks to address numerous goals, including improving payment accuracy. Moreover, I commend the bipartisan nature in which this bill was drafted. By working together in a bipartisan manner, we were able to make great progress on issues Americans truly care about. And it is my hope that this committee will expeditiously address our nation's mental health crisis in a similar bipartisan manner. In the wake of the tragic elementary school shooting in Newtown, there has been overwhelming bipartisan support for fixing our nation's broken mental health system. Yet despite this consensus, Congress has not taken any tangible action. Over the last few months, I've hosted a series of mental health forums in my district of Sacramento. Just last weekend, I was in my district of Sacramento to attend the first of what will be a number of national community mental health dialogues. The most striking thing that happened were the parents, the mothers who came to talk to me afterward about their children who suffered from depression and bipolar disorder. Some of these stories were truly heartbreaking, and I carry their stories back with me to Congress to continue to fight to better our mental health system. We all know someone who is struggling, or will struggle with mental health issues, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, or a family member. Mental illness impacts us all in some way. Unfortunately, too many Americans suffer in silence rather than getting the help they need. 1/3 of those with mood disorders do not receive the treatment they need, and fewer than half of those with severe mental disorders receive treatment of any kind in a given year. This is unacceptable. We must reverse what has become the status quo for too many mentally ill individuals: unemployment, homelessness, incarceration, hospitalization, and the rare yet devastating tragedies that have occurred in Virginia Tech, Aurora, and Newtown. That is why I introduced H.R. 1263, the Excellence in Mental Health Act, with my colleague, Leonard Lance. I am pleased that this bill enjoys bipartisan support from several members of this committee. The Excellence in Mental Health Act would incentivize our nation's community mental health centers to cover a broad range of evidence-based mental health services, like 24-hour crisis services and integrated treatment for mental illness and substance abuse. Mr. Chairman, it is my hope that this committee can be the first to take a very tangible step forward in addressing our nation's mental health crisis. This is a bipartisan issue, and it should not take another tragedy to occur before we do what we know to be right. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper. 3 minutes for an opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank Chairman Upton and Ranking Member Waxman for coordinating today's markup. One of the first issues that the medical community raised with me upon taking the oath of office in January of 2009 was the inadequacy of the sustainable growth rate and the uncertainty that it created. Let's face it, the current formula isn't fair. It's not fair for patients, and it's certainly not fair for providers. But this panel has devoted time and attention to improving the way that Medicare pays doctors. The result of this transparent process is a bipartisan plan that replaces a broken system with fairness and stability. Throughout this process, I have continuously sought guidance from Medicare beneficiaries and health professionals who care for seniors throughout Mississippi. Patients welcome the certainty that comes with this reform. Doctors appreciate that practitioners will now be rewarded for the quality of their performance, and Mississippians value the consistency that this new system enjoys. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson. 3 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to Chairman Upton for his leadership for tomorrow's markup and full committee passage of a permanent doc fix, also known as a repeal of the Sustainable Growth Rate Act, or SGR. This is a huge achievement. To illustrate the problems that the SGR poses for our doctors, I ask regular folks back home to raise their hands if their business could survive a 30% cut in revenue. No one ever does. Their hands stay in their pockets. Yet, that extreme cut is what we do every year to our doctors if Congress does not pass short-term delays of the SGR cuts. I support H.R. 2810 and the certainty it gives to doctors in the future. And I applaud the bill's innovations, giving doctors an option to choose a payment system that fits their needs of their practice and putting a focus on quality of care, the quality of care that they give. The focus on enhanced data transparency on how patient models are chosen is also a big step forward. I introduced a bipartisan bill, H.R. 846, the Diagnostic Imaging Services Access Protection Act, which 161 of my colleagues have joined, including a majority of the members of this committee. H.R. 846 would protect radiologists and patients from the harmful effects of a 25% professional component multiple procedure payment reduction through increased data transparency. It is important to see greater transparency regarding the policy rationale and supporting data to justify the professional component multiple procedure payment policy reduction. And its inclusion in H.R. 2810 would improve the bill. I know this has been a long process, and I greatly appreciate the bipartisan work that's been done. I support H.R. 2010 and encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this historic bill. Thank you again. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kingsiger, for 3 minutes for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for doing this. Tomorrow we're going to have the opportunity to consider important bipartisan legislation to repeal the flawed SGR and replace it with a system that immediately provides stability for providers and puts seniors back at the center of Medicare. In my short time in Congress, I've consistently heard from constituents that they're concerned over the perpetually looming SGR cuts that would harm patients and physicians alike. And as many of my colleagues have noted, the time to permanently fix the SGR has come. I fully support 2810 and commend the members and staffs of the Health Subcommittee for creating legislation in such a deliberative and bipartisan manner. While no piece of legislation is ever perfect, this bill represents a tremendous step forward. By modernizing Medicare payments, patients will be able to more efficiently access care based on the medical community's best practices, and providers will actually be incentivized to provide such care. More importantly, this legislation does not codify current medical practices in stone, but allows for further innovation as the healthcare industry moves towards providing more efficient and better quality care. As we all know, the greatest challenges for permanent SGR repeal lie ahead. I encourage all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to remember the strong bipartisan effort that brought us here today and not let partisan and occasional petty politics derail the prospect of a permanent SGR repeal. With that in mind, I look forward to working with all of my colleagues to permanently repeal SGR. Our seniors and physicians deserve a better Medicare, and I believe this legislation takes a much-needed step forward in addressing many of its shortcomings. Thank you, Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta. 3 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Chairman Upton for holding this markup today on these two important pieces of legislation. These two bills before us today are positive steps forward and important reforms that are needed, first in our healthcare system and secondly at the FCC. I wish to express my support for H.R. 2810, legislation that will repeal the Sustainable Growth Rate, the SGR, and replace it with stability for physicians and therefore ensuring there is certainty for access to care for all patients. Reforming and replacing the SGR is an important issue that I've heard support from the stakeholders across my district from every facet of the healthcare system. The continuous short-term extensions of the SGR that Congress has done over the years has caused great uncertainty for physician practices, especially those small practices in rural areas. These small businesses need to have a payment structure they can count on, as they still have to pay their bills to keep the lights on, regardless of what happens in Washington. The current system is broken, and I am pleased that this legislation will provide much-needed reform and replaces the current structure with a viable and stable system. In addition, this legislation will ease the current administrative burden on these providers, which will allow more time for patient care. Secondly, H.R. 2844, the Federal Communications Commission Consolidated Reporting Act, would initiate much-needed bookkeeping reforms at the FCC. The telecommunications industry is constantly changing and represents an ever-growing sector of our economy. This bill will require a streamlined approach for FCC reporting and ensure that Congress is up to date on marketplace activities by completing a report every 2 years. H.R. 2844 brings additional transparency and accountability to the FCC, which will benefit all Americans. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis. 3 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing up this very important bill. The Balanced Budget Act of 1997 created the sustainable growth rate to determine the annual update to Medicare physician fees. Unfortunately, the sustainable growth rate was anything but sustainable. Initially, the increase matched the rate of inflation, but in 2002, a 4.8% decrease was applied to physician payments. This was the first and only time a reduction was applied to physician payments. Since that time, Congress has acted every year to patch the formula and delay the cuts. This process has created a yearly situation where we are forced to pass legislation to delay the cuts and provide any adjustment to the base pay. It also has resulted in additional costs, and his only accomplishment is distorting an already broken formula. Today, we begin a process of repealing the flawed SGR and replacing it with a system that incentivizes quality care. Under the new payment system, Medicare physicians will receive a 0.5% update every year and have the ability to earn a 1% bonus payment for following quality measures. These measures subsequently improve health outcomes and are based on the clinical data endorsed by professional medical groups. This rewards physicians that practice good medicine and will help patients receive quality care. The bill will also allow for experimentation within the Medicare system. Physicians will have the ability to opt out to traditional Medicare fee-for-service and join an alternative payment model. These models will be designed by outside groups with appropriate oversight by Medicare to ensure that they do not cost more and do not lower the quality of care or outcomes. The result will be greater flexibility in the system. This is an important piece of legislation. Replacing the SGR helps not only seniors, but also our military. DOD's TRICARE is the health plan for military retirees and for the families of active duty reservists. TRICARE has traditionally used Medicare's physician fee schedule to determine physician payments. This is done administratively by DOD, but by replacing the SGR, DOD will most likely adopt this new system as their payment system. When the first draft of the SGR replacement plan was released, I held a meeting with many of the physicians in my community. Many were interested in the plan, but there was also a great sense of skepticism surrounding the possibility of passing a bill of this magnitude. Today, we take another step closer to finally repealing the SGR and replacing it with a system that rewards good practices. I support this bill and look forward to its passage. I also want to thank Chairman Upton, Chairman Pitts, and Congressman Burgess and his staff for all the hard work they've done to get us to this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Cassidy. 3 minutes for opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I commend the committee on this legislation, which, if passed by the House and the Senate, will repeal the sustainable growth rate. The SGR has created uncertainty for patients and doctors who served these patients for years. I appreciate the hard work you and your staff have put into this bill. We must take, however, additional steps to ensure that small independent practices have a place in payment reform beyond the SGR. CMS has provided alternative payment model options for large provider organizations such as ACOs. However, all the options provided encourage consolidation and sets up a process where the independent physician's practice loses his or her autonomy. We must empower independent doctors to coordinate care, improve quality, and reduce cost without sacrificing their independence. We must also recognize that sometimes specialty doctors act as principal care providers. One example, the Sharp Community Medical Group in San Diego has a comprehensive back pain program called Spine Zone. Their entire patient population has chronic back pain, and Spine Zone focuses on managing the unique needs of this population in a way that increases quality and decreases cost. 2010 data show, I am told, that not only did Spine Zone alleviate pain and improve productivity for their patients, but also reduced healthcare expenses by 25% compared to similar back pain cases. I emphasize that they improved productivity for their patients able to restore to normal life activities. That's what we want to do. We must recognize specialists as principal care providers. With these concerns in mind, I will shortly be introducing a proposal that protects the independent payment physician practice and allows both primary care providers and specialists to act as principal care physicians for their patients. My bill, the Small Group Practice Preservation Act, will allow independent principal care physician practices to financially gain from providing better coordination and quality to their patients. Third-party contractors with access to CMS data would provide the necessary tools to empower physician practices to manage their populations most effectively. We received much positive feedback on this concept so far. We look forward to continuing to build support. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you and your staff working with us on this concept, and I look forward to continuing to do so. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Seeing no other members who wish to deliver an opening statement, the chair calls up H.R. 2844 and asks the clerk to report.
2844, you said, sir?
2844.
H.R. 2844 to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to consolidate the reporting obligations of the Federal Communications Commission in order to improve congressional oversight and reduce reporting burdens.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. For the information of members, we are now on H.R. 2844. The committee will reconvene at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I remind members that the chair will give priority recognition to amendments offered on a bipartisan basis. I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Until then, we are adjourned. I beg your pardon, we stand in recess.